Hi, I'm Andrew Atkins, a food and features reporter at the Naples Daily News and storytelling coach and MC at the Storytellers Project. We so appreciate you taking a chance on live storytelling and sharing your evening with us. Tonight, we're joining Humana and 5 Floridians to create community. Since 2016, the Storytellers Project has brought more than 100 shows each year to communities across the country. But we've canceled our in-person season as part of the USA Today Network's response to the novel coronavirus. While it feels unsafe to be together in theaters, it feels necessary to be together online. So we've handpicked incredible storytellers and inspiring people to bring you a show about growing up. Trigger warning. Tonight's show has stories that deal with eating disorders and drug addiction. For more information or help, you can reach out to www.nationaleatingdisorders.org/help-support/contact-helpline, as well as www.samhsa.gov/find-help/national-helpline. Now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and say hi to our storytellers for the evening. We have Casie Shimansky, Philip Abbondanza, Cheyenne Hannigan, Shirley and Torin Platt. Now, before we go any further, I have to tell you what tonight isn't. Tonight is not a TED Talk, it's not a Toastmasters, not a how-to talk, an inspirational speech, an educational lecture, or a slideshow. We won't sell you anything except maybe a subscription. This is storytelling, and storytelling is based on visiting. You open your heart and your mind, and you pay attention to a person you care about and want to feel closer to. So we invite you to do that tonight. Some of these storytellers will be polished and professional. Some will be casual and conversational. We ask you to receive all of them because that's how community change happens. We believe creating empathy and understanding is vital at all times, and especially in times of uncertainty. And I am so excited to welcome up our first teller. Our first teller of the evening is Casie Shimansky with a story about finding beauty despite pain. Casie, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I am a proud introvert. This is not my comfort zone. In fact, this will be visually showcased by my chameleon skin that will magically turn 3 shades of red if it hasn't already. I hate the spotlight, but sometimes the universe just doesn't care and throws you into it anyway, daring you to stretch all your height of 5'4" 3/4 for all it's worth. When my younger sister, Kelly, came home from a 7th grade trip that took her to the Florida Keys, she bounced into my room, ignored all the papers and books I had my nose in, and asked me, a 14-year-old, "How do you know if you're in love?" I thought about it for a minute. I really had no idea myself, but I responded with, "You just do." She nodded, happy with my answer at just 12 years old, somehow understanding what I could not, and bounced back out of the room, high on sunshine and salt water. The night before she died, I felt the universe shift for the very first time. That's when I knew. After a week of unknowns, no culprit, no cause, she would have been the first person on the East Coast to receive a liver for the one that was failing her. But I knew then that liver was never coming, and we were waiting for her to die. As I held my 18-year-old sister's hand for the last time, life slowed to an impossible crawl. The hospital's soundtrack kept time, and with each beat, I braced for impact. April 10th, 2004, 8:25 in the morning, this life without her began. And I knew I'd never be the same. From the parking lot, I took one final look up to the room where she had been, at least where I thought she had been. I was, in fact, leaving with very swollen eyes and only one contact lens, the other lost to the sea of tears. The nurses had given me saline solution to try and save it, but it had ripped in my valiant effort, and I hadn't thought to bring my glasses to Gainesville, where she had been airlifted just days before. But it was fitting. This blurry mess was now my life, and I had a whole lot of questions I was shouting out to the sky. How am I going to graduate college without her? How am I going to get married without her? How are we even going to go home without her? 2 hours later, we checked the first challenge off the list. We were home. Greeted by our dogs, who somehow knew, I picked up Reese, the red miniature dachshund we all told her not to get, and I burrowed my face in his fur. I'm glad she always broke the rules. I sat in eerie silence, surrounded by artifacts of our past life. Pictures, paperwork, mail addressed to her, her room. Clothes still tossed around from the week before, messes that had been her mark. Just a month shy of my 21st birthday, I swapped planning a night out with Kelly and our friends for another priority instead. I was the writer in the family, so late at night, as our large New Jersey families filled our home and slept anywhere they could find, I sat at the kitchen table with the light on low and got to working on her eulogy instead. The next morning was her funeral day, and I awoke to a frigid, blustery April morning in Florida, unexpected and out of nowhere. And as I laid in bed, losing myself in the ceiling, I took note of how the wind was just like her, sometimes light and breezy, other times fierce and resilient. It was then that I knew I had two options. I could stay here in my twin-size bed and shrivel up into nothing. I pondered it for half a second too long until Kelly's voice took over. It was faint at first, but then it overpowered every other noise in the house that morning. Live out loud. So there was really only ever one option here. The funeral home that morning was packed with nearly every face our family had ever known, and Kelly had made friends wherever she went. Additional rooms had to be open just so people had a place to go, and some of them still waited outside in the cold. As it came time for me to find my voice, I felt the universe shift once more, or was that her pushing me? I stood up from my front row seat, flattened my black and white skirt, and forced my feet forward. Kelly was the extrovert. Kelly stole spotlights. I didn't really want to be doing this, but I would for her. Besides, I knew eyes would be on me whether I said something or nothing, and so I started telling stories instead. There was that time in kindergarten where Kelly, at all of 5 years old, forgot something for show and tell and decided to show her classmates her belt instead. It was just an ordinary belt. There was nothing special about it, but to Kelly, it didn't matter. She had something to show, and she made things incredible. Or how she'd go to the movies with me just so I wouldn't have to go alone, and how at the quietest, saddest part in the final moments of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, she and I shed nonstop tears of laughter over a burp that wasn't as quiet as I thought it was going to be. I've not really ordered a full soda at the movies since. She broke our microwave, ripped the door handle clear off the machine, and so if you're wondering which of the three Shimansky sisters not to mess with, that'd be Kelly. And just 2 weeks prior to all this madness, how I drove my sisters out to the Gulf Coast and couldn't find the beach. Yes, in Florida, where there is only one direction to drive and not hit water, I lost the beach. To my sisters, it was just a scenic route to the mall that was 10 minutes to our house. I could always win them back with a trip to the mall. And as we parked, I took note of how happy we were, how fun the day had been, how good life was, how quickly it all could change. Now, I won't tell you that the years since were easy, because they weren't, and I was about as broken as they come. But after 7 years, I did graduate college without her. And no, I'm not a doctor or a lawyer. I just got lost there too and took the scenic route to a 2-year degree that eventually would have its own stars align, where I would become, of all things, a storyteller. And this time I also dated boys I knew she would not approve of, and she let me know it. No, not this one. He's awful. Oh, him, he doesn't even like dogs. And I constantly talked myself out of opportunities while telling myself I wouldn't wait for life. I put my life on hold, needing to make sure everyone was taken care of first. A year after that April, in an attempt to find some normalcy, I started a job as a Men in Black agent defending the galaxy from aliens at Universal Orlando. And that first day, I met a boy, and I felt the universe shift once again. Oh no, not now. My trainer, while standing between us, introduced this red-headed boy that towered over me and immediately followed it with, "He has a girlfriend," as if that were his last name. Well, good for Shawnee has a girlfriend. He's younger than you. I don't know why this is part of my training. Will I be learning the ages and relationship statuses of all my coworkers? I had already taken myself out of this one. I was really good at being single. And he was, well, he just seemed too nice, too redheaded, too had a girlfriendy. Although, yes, Kelly inserted her opinion there too. You know, nice would be a good change of pace for you. Shawnee has a girlfriend, and I barely spoke to one another. But when we did, we shared the same electrifying language of love, sarcasm. And somewhere in there, our friendship grew. He came to my 22nd casino cruise birthday, and our group accidentally left him at the terminal. He invited me to Sweeney Todd, yes, the musical about a throat-slashing barber, and he paid. And we went to a mutual friend's party, stayed up all night talking, watched the sun rise together, and he put his hat on my head, which apparently to this redheaded boy meant, I really like you, but I'm not going to kiss you, but we should probably spend forever together, which I wouldn't actually learn for quite some time. In the chaotic midst of reestablishing my life, I struggled to remember who I was before April 10th. Who was I without Kelly? How could the sun still shine when I was so broken? I searched for answers and meaning everywhere, only to find grief and emptiness. And while I did my best to move forward, it was really tough to know what forward looked like. That's when the phone rang. Hello? Oh, universe? That's you again? On the other end of that phone was a firefighter named Garrett, looking for a photographer to cover a head shaving event that would benefit children's cancer research. And I happened to be a photographer with a free Saturday in March. I thought I was going to just any old event that day. Instead, that one Saturday gave my grief a place to go. And finally, I started to live out loud a little bit. 2 years later, I fell so quickly for this organization and the change we were making for kids battling cancer that I made them a promise. I'd go bald too. But before Garrett could pull me up on stage and auction off my hair right there on the spot, which was shoulder length and blonde at the time, I said, no. You have to wait for the event after I'm married. He smiled and said, you're on. I'm going to hold you to that. Around the same time, I discovered what it truly meant to place your hat upon a girl's head after watching the sun rise together when that redheaded boy, who was now my best friend, finally clued me in. In turn, I told him about the promise I had just made to St. Baldrick's, half thinking a bald chick might scare him off. And that boy's first words back to me were, you're going to rock that. And there it was, the universal shift I've just come to know. I knew I loved him then. I guess you do just know. 5 years, a home, and a puppy later, he asked me to marry him. At least I think he did. He got down on one knee, things got really blurry again, but there was a ring and a sunset and some waltz and some salt water, and I said yes. Oranges and reds and purples had never looked that way they did that night in that sunset. I had gone home without her. I had graduated without her. And on March 22nd, 2018, after starting that ceremony early because we just couldn't wait any longer, I married that redheaded boy without her. 2 days later, hair colors didn't matter. We were bald, and I did in fact rock it. After buzzing 19 inches of long purple hair off my head, I raised over $26,000 for the St. Baldrick's Foundation that year and have been a top fundraiser ever since. And together, the team I captain in Kelly's memory has raised over $100,000 for children battling cancer. And that team's name is Team Live Out Loud. Yes, losing her broke me, but I see now too that it also built me. Those 3 little words, live out loud, were words I woke up swimming in my head just days after we lost her. They always got me out of bed, but they took years for me to truly own and live. I grieve daily for the things she's missed, the things I've had to do without her. But I also know she's been with me every step of the way, because in fact, I've carried her this entire time in my heart. And every now and then, I still hear her shout out from the stars. You have a voice. Do the thing you think you cannot do. Fight for these kids. Go bald. That redheaded boy is the one. Marry him. Buy the soda. Step into the spotlight. Live Out loud. I am a proud introvert. This is not my comfort zone. But sometimes the universe has other plans. Sometimes you just do.
Thank you, Casie, for sharing your story on living out loud. I think finding the silver lining, or red hair in your case, is a lesson I think anyone can learn more about. Now, to you viewers, if you loved Casie's story, show her by clapping for her with the like button and reactions. Before we move on to our next teller, I want to thank our sponsor. Humana is sponsoring Storyteller Project shows nationally and now virtually because they believe that sharing stories and connecting as humans, online or in person, makes for healthier people and healthier communities. And we need those connections to each other and to health now more than ever. As COVID-19 vaccinations become available in communities across the country, Humana strongly encourages you to consider getting your vaccine and to discuss with your doctor what is best for your health. Visit humana.com for more about what they're doing each and every day to connect you to better health in your community. The next teller in tonight's lineup is Philip Abbondanza with a story about the magic of the silver screen. Philip, the stage is yours.
Well, when you're pushing 3/4 of a century, you're more rambling down memory lane than looking at the superhighway ahead. So this is one of my best memories. When I was a youngster, the usual Saturday ritual included my brother and I getting $1 from each of my parents so we could spend the afternoon at the movies. This also served the purpose of giving Mom and Dad a few hours of quiet time and to relax without us. Before leaving, I'd supplement the $1 with 50 cents or more that I had stored in the glass milk bottle in my room. Most of that money I had earned from doing chores around the house, and some by selling my old toys and dog-eared comic books that I passed over as rare additions to the kids in the neighborhood. The theater wasn't too far from where we lived. Well, we always got there early, especially when there was a double feature science fiction or a comedy. My favorite, though, was The Creature from the Black Lagoon. There were 2 sequels from it, and I made it a point to see them all. I loved playing the creature, especially during the summer months when the lawn pools dotted the newly built post-war homes put together for the returning GIs and the baby boom that was in full swing. Going from pool to pool, I put on my best creature face and stalking walk, having a great time imitating what I loved to see on the screen. Getting on the long line that went along the block, there were kids from all over the surrounding area, waiting patiently for the ticket booth to open. The doors opened promptly at 11, and a surge of kids would rush in to claim their seats, then run up to the candy counter to stock up for the show. The best seats were in the middle of mezzanine, of course, but others got right up front. I was one of those who would love to be right on top of the screen, having to tilt my head back and see every detail as the cinematic play unfolded. The prices for an afternoon of entertainment would fit right to my budget. Admission, 25 cents. Jumbo popcorn with loads of butter, 35 cents. Large soda, 20 cents. Leaving a net spare change of 20 cents for additional treats. I'll combine it with the money that I took from home and sometimes use it to buy an ice cream soda and a comic book on the way back. We always got a lot for the price of admission. First a newsreel, then a half dozen or more trailers, a few cartoons, then the main feature in the second movie. A little bit too much, perhaps, but there were some of the best movies ever produced. When Worlds Collide, Creature from the Black Lagoon, as mentioned, comedies with Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, Abbott and Costello, The Three Stooges, any Disney feature you want to mention, and many others. All great movies that would leave us wide-eyed, laughing and having an enjoyable, fun-filled afternoon. The Northern Boulevard Theater in Queens was a gem of a movie theater. Inside, while waiting for the house to go dark, I'd gaze up at the Art Deco quasi-classic motifs that looked down upon the audience from around the chandeliered ceiling. There was a suggestion of nudity from the pixie light nymphs that circled the chandelier that tickled my young imagination as to what they may be up to. Cowboy pictures bored me. I loved The Long Ranger and Hop-Along only because they were half-hour long on TV and no kissy girly stuff. Of course, we all loved it when the hero's lady would pull up her dress to strip off a piece of slip to cover the hero's wound. Some of the older kids would yell, Take it off, take it off, take it all off. I didn't know what that really meant then, but went along with the chant anyway. By the time the day had ended, there'd be a brief curtain call, and then the whole thing would repeat. A dedicated movie watcher could stay and watch both features over again without having to pay again. By the time the rerun was over, most kids would come out into the daylight, their eyes the size of pinholes. This didn't go over too well with parents that were left with dinner getting cold and wondering where their children could be. The Saturday matinee always seemed to attract more boys and girls, as I believe the girls wouldn't want to mix with the rowdier kids that came for the show. The ushers would sometimes be quite busy keeping the crowd peaceful and stop them from flinging the popcorn boxes into the air and onto the stage. It was known as the quiet little riot. But the greatest show wasn't always a film. There were always contests to entertain the audience, and the annual yo-yo contest was the highlight of the year. Until I owned a yo-yo, I couldn't really appreciate how difficult it was to control one. It looked simple enough. You tied the end of the string to your finger, let it drop from your hand, give it a slight pull, then wait for it to return your hand. Repeat. Only it didn't work that way for me. Most of the time it just dropped, made a half-hearted effort to come back, then stayed there. I learned that, just like that yo-yo, not to expect things in my life to just simply happen to me without putting in effort. With the contest over, one kid would walk off with an envelope containing free admission movie ticket, coupons for treats at the candy counter, and a yo-yo champion trophy. The rest of us watching the event? Well, if you really wanted to know, we gave them a round of polite applause, maybe hit the restroom, went back to our seats, and waited for the B-list movie to start. Ever so often, the matinee would feature a film not so age-appropriate for the average boomer. And I remember having to sit there and watch these romantic comedies or dramas, struggling to make it fit into my 6-year-old perspective. This sometimes would wind up with me asking my mom the naive question, what was that lady doing walking around in a flimsy sweat slip? But otherwise, the movies brought us thrills, chills, and laughter, amplifying a fictional reality that brought us temporarily beyond our everyday lives. I'll never forget the rugged confidence of John Wayne as a pilot of an endangered passenger plane in The High and the Mighty, or the giant ants in Them. And never forget the zany craziness of Jerry Lewis acting and gesticulating in outlandish fashion for the big screen. It was later on, when I was in middle school, I was employed as a usher at the same movie. One evening when I came in, I was told that Annette Funicello, the teen heartthrob of that time, was coming to make an appearance promoting her newest movie. She had been a Mouseketeer on the Mickey Mouse Show for years. Her popularity grew as both her and her audience grew older, especially moving on to tweener movies like Beach Blanket Bingo in the early 50s. I couldn't believe it. Me, her biggest fan, was actually going to see her in person. Because I had her picture inside my gym locker door and talked about her as if I was actually dating her, I became the butt of my classmates' jokes and was constantly teased to death about it. I was told to stand by the stage steps and keep people from going on the stage. I was ready, all 110 pounds of me, prepared to defend her with my trusty flashlight. Right before she came into the theater, the manager handed me a bouquet of flowers and told me to present it to her on stage. She was there for no more than a half hour, sang a few songs, then after the applause said her thanks. Even though I felt like none of it was real, I found myself dreamlike on the stage, my teen heart beating like crazy and giving her the flowers. Then she smiled, looked me straight in the eyes, and gave me a peck on the cheek. I floated home that night without even the rain touching me on the way. The next day at school, I was suddenly big man on campus. Half the school was there the previous evening, and they all seen me get a kiss from Annette. Even my teachers understood my glazed, detached look that day. From then on, no more teasing ever. No more jokes. And by the way, I didn't wash that side of my face for a week. Looking back, I feel movies were not only one of the ways that inspired and entertained us, but brought us together and taught us about our commonality as citizens and human beings. The fight between good and evil, how to react and live with our fellow citizens here on planet Earth, taking stewardship of the environment, and building on the knowledge of those who came before us. My career in anthropology was born in those darkened citadels of flight and fancy. The Egyptian, the robe, 1,000,000 years BC. Movies pointing the way to my vocation, making me an Indiana Jones before there was one. Fanciful journeys into the future and the deep past set my imagination on fire. But what could be and how to be a part of it? Movies like Bataan, Run Silent, Run Deep, Pork Chop Hill were visual histories of brave men and women fighting for the shared dream of freedom on the big screen, reinforced my love of country. I miss the dark and cavernous room, the wide screen, the smell of popcorn drifting in the air, and watching the passing parade of my neighbors and fellow moviegoers. Nothing can replace the feel of the movie seat and the expectation of what's to come. As the curtain opens, the open credits begin, and the movie starts in that shared community place called the movie theater.
Thank you, Philip, for your story. Anyone can appreciate that look into today's past and see how it can relate to them, just as you said, even now when they step into a theater. If you love Phil's story, go ahead and show him. You can clap for him with the like button and reactions. Our next teller of the evening is Cheyenne Hannigan, with a story about growing up very quickly. Cheyenne, whenever you're ready.
I grew up in a very close-knit family. I was the oldest of 5. My dad worked full-time, and my mom was a homemaker, homeschooler. She took care of us in every way. And it was a very happy way to grow up. My parents were very strict and very protective. So growing up, I did not have access to the internet. My books had to be pre-screened, as did all my movies. And of course, my friends. They were mostly homeschooled and very religious, just like I was. So my family, being incredibly close, my brothers and sisters were my best friends, and my parents were the paragon of love and everything that I hoped for someday. That changed when I was 12 years old. My baby sister, Olivia, was born, and my parents started having some trouble in their marriage. My mom, I believe, also went through some postpartum depression, which is something that happens a lot with new mothers who've just given birth. At 12, I decided it was my time to step up to the plate to become the third adult in the house. I took a lot of care of my baby sister while my mom was in her worst parts of her depression. I was my mom's confidant. I was the assistant educator for my brothers and sisters, and I did a lot of the homemaking, the cleaning, and such. It was a very scary time in my life, and I felt very out of control. When I turned 13, I decided I was not going to feel out of control anymore. And I went to controlling my eating and my exercise in order to maintain that feeling of control, that illusion of control. Between the age of 13 and 14, I lost about 70 pounds. I went down to 250 calories a day, mostly protein shakes, no real food. And I exercised constantly. Somewhere at the midway mark of all this, my parents noticed there was something wrong. I was very thin and very depressed. They said that it was like I wasn't there anymore, like I was a shell of who I used to be. So they tried counseling and they tried a dietitian, and none of it worked. I was so far gone. I began dreaming about killing myself or just dying quietly, fading away. I went to bed every night hoping I wasn't going to wake up. In December of 2010, we went to visit some family, and my parents got a wake-up call when my relatives saw me and told my parents, "She's really sick. You need to do something. She's not going to be with us next Christmas if you don't help her." So in January of 2011, my parents sent me away 1,300 miles from where I'd always lived in Naples, Florida, to a place just outside Chicago, Illinois, that was a psychiatric treatment center. It was the scariest time in my life. I had never been away from my family. These girls, I had no way to connect to them. They had seen so much more of the world than I ever had. So when I arrived, I decided I'm just not going to eat. I'll just die here. It'll be even better. I'll die here. My parents won't even have to see it happen. Everyone's happy. I'll just be gone. That choice was taken from me on the second day. I was in the kitchen and I had turned down my food as I had been doing since I had arrived. And a nurse plunked a nutrition shake in front of me and she said, "Sweetheart, tomorrow they're going to load you into an ambulance and take you to the hospital. They're going to strap you to the bed and they're going to intubate you until you gain the weight back. So you can either do that or drink this, and we'll take one step at a time." That was my turning point. Albeit wasn't really my choice at that point, but I decided to drink that shake. And then that next day, I decided to eat that meal. Over the next 3 months, I was not allowed to walk. I was put on a 3,000 calorie a day diet. I was full all the time. I was so bloated. I felt absolutely disgusting, and I hated myself with every fiber of my being. I called my parents crying and asking them, why am I here? Why did you send me away? And eventually all of the anger and hurt that I had been storing up for 2 years came out. And I remember being angry just all the time. And that was what needed to happen. After 3 months in that center, I had gained far more weight than I had wanted to. And I was discharged to an outpatient center for another 1.5 years. At that point, I was 15. And when I wasn't at that treatment center, I was going to college, doing high school, getting a job, and buying a car. I realized coming home that my childhood was gone. I couldn't get it back. And so I had to move forward and I had to be an adult. That realization has hit me hard in the following years, realizing that I grew up way too fast. Maybe partially out of a choice of my own, partially out of a lack of other alternatives. But in that process, my parents' marriage healed. They're stronger now than they ever have been. And they attribute that to me, to my therapy, pushing them to get their things in order and their house in order so that I could come home to a healthy family. Now I am a child welfare advocate. I work with highly traumatized children, particularly in the foster care system. And I have a great relationship with my family. None of that would have happened if it hadn't been for my experiences, for my eating disorder. Every day, I have to make a choice to be in recovery. Some days are hard. The more stressed I am, the harder it is to not go to those old patterns or to create new unhealthy patterns. But every day, I make that choice for my family and for myself. And I'm very thankful for now being 10 years in recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheyenne, for sharing your story about moving forward and healing. If you loved Cheyenne's story, show her. You can clap for her with a like button and reactions. Our fourth teller of the evening is Shirley Govender. Shirley has a story about South Africa. There's more to it, but I'll let Shirley give you the details. Shirley, take it away.
Sawubona, hello, how's everyone doing? My story is about the lasting friendships I made with South Africans of color, despite my experiences of growing up during the apartheid era. Apartheid refers to a system of segregation based on race. In South Africa, there are four main racial groups. The Blacks, or as they are called, the Africans or the native Zulus, the Whites, who are of European ancestry, the Indians, like me, who are from East India, and the Coloreds, who are mixed. Under the apartheid law, each race had to live and operate in their own separate race. So during the 1980s and the early 1990s, whilst I was growing up, I was raised in an all-Indian town. So despite me growing up in a multiracial society, I never got to make friends with a Black, white, or colored kid. I tried, but it was not possible. I must have been a 7-year-old when I got my first puppy. I was playing outside with him when a Black domestic worker's kid ran over to join me. My mom then yelled to me to get inside. I tried to explain to her that I was only just playing with him, and then she said to me, "I'm not allowed to. It's not possible." Tears welled up in my eyes as I walked inside, and the little boy walked away. The childhood pleasures that we take for granted would often turn into a frightful experience for me. I was about 9 years old when my parents took my siblings and I on a weekend outing trip to one of Durban's beachfront along the Indian Ocean. As we were playing in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, we spotted, for the very first time in our lives, a swimming pool. We hurriedly ran to it and dipped our feet in it. No sooner did we do that, did two policemen appear. My chest tightened and my stomach knotted up as the policeman commanded my dad to remove us from the pool area. As we left the pool area, they pointed us out to a sign that said whites only. As I left the pool area, I had this feeling of shame and fear. But this was the feeling that I was so accustomed to growing up in South Africa. My revelation, the revelation of the pain and suffering that the Blacks experienced under the apartheid regime dawned upon me when I came down with a bad case of tonsillitis. I was sitting in the outpatient clinic in the local Indian hospital waiting for treatment. I was peeking through the window and could see outside a taxi rank right at the entrance to the hospital. Suddenly, a Black woman jumped up the taxi, walked through the entrance of the hospital. She looked like she was in pain, and then she laid down at the grassy bank on the entrance and delivered her baby. I was shocked. This was such an overwhelming experience for me. I later learned that the South African Blacks lived in poverty and had little or no access to healthcare services and other basic life necessities such as water, electricity, transportation, and sanitation. The shopping district in the town that I grew up in was divided into an uptown and a downtown. The uptown was for white exclusive only businesses, and the downtown was for Indian colored owned businesses. On rare occasions, such as over the Christmas holidays, my parents would take me shopping uptown. I would get to marvel at the beautiful decorations in the large upscale stores. Walking through the wide aisles and the large tiled floors and the big window panes, I would contrast them to the crowded, musty, and poorly lit stores downtown. But these were the sights, sounds, and smells of inequality that I grew up with. Nelson Mandela was a very famous political figure worldwide. But believe it or not, when I was growing up, I never got to hear about him. I never learned about him in school or got to read about him in the newspapers, hear about him on the radio, or even watch news about him on television. Any subject or topic related to Nelson Mandela was banned by the South African government. I only got to learn about this iconic hero by the way or by chance. My dad had a friend who lived in Howick, which was about 45 miles from the suburb that I was raised in. One particular day, we were riding on the highway to Howick, and we had to pass this roadway. And alongside this roadway, I discovered this little makeshift memorial site. I learned that this makeshift memorial site commemorated the day, August 5th, 1962, when Nelson Mandela was arrested and then taken to a prison in Johannesburg. From there, he was sentenced at the Rivonia trial and taken to Robben Island to begin his 27 years of imprisonment. That little memorial site would become, for my young mind, the only glimmer of hope I had for a future free from apartheid. The most positive part of growing up in South Africa was that I had the opportunity to grow on African soil, play under the warm African sun, and live alongside the most amazing and incredibly beautiful wildlife. These three gifts of Mother Nature, sun, soil, and wildlife, filled me with such vibrancy and healing energy that I no more saw myself as this fearful, ashamed, and weak South African Indian girl, but as a strong African woman. It's so hard to describe this feeling, and the best way to describe it is how I explain it to my patients. The feeling of being an African is like an incurable disease. Once you make that connection to the beauty of South Africa, you start feeling the energy of Africa in your blood. It permeates every part of your existence and being, and leaves you feeling an African forever. When I was 18, I started a nursing program that was 3 years into accepting non-white students. At first, sitting in a class with students of color was very nerve-wracking. However, over the next 4 years of our program, we made very strong connections that was based on the fact that we all had a similar unique experience of growing up in a beautiful country under the same African sun, on the same African soil, and alongside the most amazingly beautiful wildlife. We all related to one another as African, not as white, black, or colored. I believe that it was this spiritual connection to Africa that fueled our friendships and moved us to a higher ground and helped us to overcome the trials, injustices, prejudice, fear, and shame of apartheid. Up until today, we all still keep in contact by WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook. Out of habit, we greet one another with the traditional Zulu greeting, Sawubona, which means I see you, I acknowledge you, I respect you. Yes, growing up, my mom might have told me that it was not possible to make friends with someone who was not Indian. Nelson Mandela said, "It always seems impossible until it is done." Yes, it is possible. It has been done. Friendships forever. Sawubona.
Thank you, Shirley, for sharing your story. I feel anyone can learn something from your compassion. If you love Shirley's story, show her. You can clap for her with the like button in reactions. Before we move on to our final teller of the evening, I want to take a moment to thank our subscribers. We're so thankful for you, subscribers, because you support this community's journalism. For those of you who aren't subscribers, we appreciate you giving us the chance to show our value to you tonight and hope you consider a digital subscription to the Naples Daily News and the Fort Myers News Press here in Southwest Florida. Journalists in these markets coach tonight's tellers. Our final teller of the evening is Torin Platt. Torin has a story about rising from the ashes. Torin, go ahead when you're good and ready.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I love the life that I have today. I have a great relationship with my family, especially my mother, Wendy. She's the reason I'm here tonight in more ways than one. A host of close friends, a job that I absolutely love. But believe it or not, that wasn't always the case for me. And sort of keeping in theme with tonight's, with tonight of growing up, I'm essentially going to tell my whole life story because it's basically taken me this long to get there. I guess I'll start with how my parents met. My dad's from Pittsburgh and my mom's from Long Island, New York. And they met at a time where they were both trying to better their lives in West Palm Beach, Florida. They moved to Hawaii, and that's where I was born, in the island of Kauai. And people ask me, military family. And I kind of casually say, no, my parents just went there to party and just never left. That's sort of where I come from is a long line of alcoholics and addicts, and I'm not ashamed of that. But no matter the case, I was born during a Hurricane Iniki, 2 months after the hurricane hit, and I was in a hospital that didn't have power, and I was born with heart complications and pneumonia, and probably one of the first miracles that I'm even alive today was, making it through that. And my parents sort of split, I think, a couple years after I was born, and my mom realized she needed to kind of get her stuff together, and my dad kind of couldn't. And we lived in I remember at one point in time we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment where me and my sister slept in the bed and my mom slept on the couch. And I mean, that didn't really have any effect on me. I grew up by the beach and in the water, and I had a relatively good childhood. I would see my dad on the weekends, and it's like the older I get, the more I realize that I didn't have a bad childhood, But when I was 6 years old, we moved here to Fort Myers, Florida, to be closer to my grandparents, and that's where my life really changed. That was definitely a pivoting point in my life where I kind of didn't really have any worries. And then when I was 6 years old, and my father didn't follow us to Florida, that's where resentment started to brew in my heart and my mind, and I kind of just hated everything, and what 6-year-old kid isn't a little selfish? But I was sort of unable to grow out of that selfishness later in life, which I'll get into. But I just remember being so mad at everything, and I can see now that my mother did what she needed to do for me and my sister. She had to get some support into her life and not be isolated on this little island. So, moving 5,000 miles away from somebody that I love spending time with, really, affected me in a way. But, that's not really, I can see now that, she was doing what was best for her, and I've definitely come to terms with that. But, therapy and medication and all the help and love and support that my family tried to give me, I was not receptive towards, and the first time that I finally felt okay, was when I got drunk for the first time at 11 or 12 years old. I can't really remember, but all I remember is that this restless, irritable, discontented feeling that I had washed away when I had gotten drunk, it allowed me, it finally gave me some ease and comfort. It allowed me to escape reality and escape my feelings. And, I bottled up my emotions and ran from my problems my entire life. And it all started from there. I self-medicated with whatever chemical I could put into my body to feel different. I did that. And, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I'm not a doctor. So, it probably wasn't the best for me to be making those decisions for myself. And, I got involved with a bad group of friends. I started getting in a lot of trouble. I got arrested more than I can count on two hands, in the time span when I was like 12 to 15. And I was just a mess. I mean, I was just doing whatever I wanted and really causing harm in people's lives, especially my family's. And I would get arrested so fast that I would get arrested again before my next court date. I got sentenced to this 9-month dual diagnosis treatment program that was in the middle of the Everglades. And, I got arrested again before I could go to that. So I'm sitting at DJJ until I go to this program. And, looking back, I'm incredibly grateful for that experience. It was the end of the world when it happened, but, it wasn't that bad. It was basically like summer camp with a prison fence. It could have been a lot worse. And that experience did change my life in a way. And a big thing that they taught there was empathy and, the ripple effect and how my actions impact other people. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to keep me sober for an extended period of time when I left there. But it did change me a bit. And it just kind of, it taught me to sort of stay under the radar, like just kind of keep out of the eyes of people. But, a few months after I got out of there, I got out on my 16th birthday and I felt great. And it wasn't long until I started, smoking weed again or whatever. But a few months later, my dad died of an overdose, and, we weren't incredibly close. So it wasn't like this heartbreaking thing, but, I felt really numb after that. I realized too, sometime after that, it took me, I think, 3 years to even cry about it. I just bottled up my emotions and just shoved it all down and turned to putting chemicals into my body to change the way that I felt for so long that was just my coping mechanism. And, high school wasn't that bad. I mean, I may have been a bit of a weekend warrior, but I don't think other kids were sneaking out on a Wednesday night to go party at a friend's house, and it slowly got worse and worse. By the time I was 21 and could buy alcohol anywhere, I was just off to the races. And it didn't take long for things to get bad. I got a DUI when I think I was 22. I was sleeping on friends' couches, toxic relationships, sort of just any help that somebody would give me, I would take advantage of it. My sister was so kind as to let me live with her, friends' houses, whatever it was. And the bottom line was I was just a taker. It was like almost like all I knew how to do was see what I could get out of people and out of things just to get the easy ride. I was incredibly lazy and I just wanted the easy way out. I wanted great things and I had all these aspirations and I was ambitious, but I couldn't apply myself. And it wasn't until I went through methamphetamine addiction, actually, that it really brought me to my knees, and a truly crippling, insidious, evil, experience and state of being that I was in, that I was finally got honest and talked to somebody about what was going on in my life, which happened to be my mother. She was sober for a couple of years at the time. And I just asked for help and told her what was going on, and she kind of knew exactly what to do, and she was willing to help me. So I was living in North Carolina at the time. I moved back down to Florida, and I got involved in a spiritual program of action, and being a part of that process and doing this was that I was finally able to look at my part. I was finally able to realize that my selfishness and self-centeredness was the root of all of my problems. I was the problem. I always thought that things around me were the problem. It was the girl. It was people were doing this to me. The town that I'm living in, it didn't matter. I was finally able to take a look at myself and look at my failures and learn to accept those and learn from them and change those things. I wasn't able to identify and fix the problem, until I saw that it was me. And, when I got involved in this process and I started doing the next right thing, a rapid succession of coincidences started to happen. And one of my favorite quotes is a quote by Albert Einstein, and he says that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. And I love that because, if Albert Einstein can't intellectualize the non-existence of God, I don't know what makes me think that I can. I was pretty resistant towards seeking any sort of spiritual entity or God or whatever you want to call it. All I know is that when I started to seek this higher power and live my life on a spiritual basis, a number of incredible things started to happen in my life. The relationship with my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my sister, my mother, what years of therapy attempted was washed away in a matter of almost minutes, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful to finally be on good terms with people and be able to look people in the eye. Like I'm incredibly grateful to just be able to do that, to not feel this shame and guilt of carrying around like all this crap that I carried around with me for so long. And through the process of admitting my faults and mending these broken relationships, I realized that I had to go through all of that pain and hardship to appreciate anything beautiful in life. I had to be completely miserable to appreciate the small things. And, I can see now that finding this connection with a power greater than myself and all these great things in my life, I had to go through what I did in order to experience them. And I don't regret the past. I don't wish to shut the door on it. I can see today how my experience can benefit others, how me going through what I did can help pull somebody out from where that same place of just isolation and despair. I wanted to die before I finally, asked for help and found a spiritual solution in my life. And today the quality of my life is dictated on what I bring to it instead of what I get out of it. And my aunt gave me this book a little while ago. It's called The Book of Joy, The Secret to Joy, something like that. And it's about these two high-ranking spiritual members in two very different religions of Christianity and Buddhism. And they're talking throughout the book about what they can agree upon to be the secret to joy. You know, what do we have to do in order to be joyous, happy, joyous, and free, as opposed to just happy, you know? And basically it's like 450 pages, and at the end of the book, they're basically like, well, I think there's one thing that we can agree upon. The secret to joy is to being kind and generous to other people. And when I read that, I was pissed. I'm like, really? I just read this entire book just to learn that's it? That's all you're going to tell me? And you know, it clicked for me then, was that's all that I have to do. You know, when I focus on what I want and what I'm not getting out of it, and you know, living in fear of not getting what I want or losing what I already have, I'm miserable. When I can just put all that aside and focus on what I can do for other people, I escape myself. I escape that selfish, self-centered state of being, and I'm truly happy in that moment. And I'm incredibly grateful to be where I am today, you know, and I'm incredibly grateful to be a part of this project. And if anyone out there is struggling, I hope you know that there is hope, and there's lots of help available. And, you know, the light shines bright at the end of the tunnel. And, you know, I've been reborn. I'm not the person that I've ever been my entire life, and I owe that all to you know, doing the next right thing, and being involved in other people's lives, and a helpful, you know, kind, generous human being is the only way I can really attribute to where I'm at. So thank you so much for letting me share.
Thank you, Torin, for sharing your story. I know your healing resonated with our audience tonight. Like the others, if you love Torin's story, show him. You can clap for him with the like button and reactions. Now, we're going to wrap up the night by bringing our storytellers of the evening up to say thank you. Casie, thank you. Philip, thank you so much. Cheyenne, thank you so much. Shirley, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Casie, Philip, Cheyenne, Shirley, Torin, go ahead and wave goodnight to your viewers, and allow me to say thank you for the privilege of hearing your stories tonight. Good night, all, and take care.